Welcome to the third session of the ACM Hangout series, which is hosted by Arts Council Malta. As you are aware now, the series is Arts Council Malta's regular virtual platform for networking and knowledge-sharing sessions. This is our third session, which is focusing on the beneficiaries of the investment in cultural organizations. Together, we are exploring a range of themes with representatives from these organizations, as well as different key speakers who are joining us every week to discuss the different topics. So, for the first two sessions, we discussed sustainability in different ways. One was focusing on teams, and the other one was focusing on keeping memories alive, on how we archive, how we document. Today, we are going to discuss an important topic, which is very current, which is on everyone's minds, literally, and this is how to effectively fundraise for your cultural organization. Fundraising, as we know, can be a very strenuous task, particularly during a crisis. In this session, what we will be doing is that we will be sharing different fundraising models with a specific focus on models and practices used by arts organizations, as well as crowdfunding as a tool to engage audiences and sustain our cultural work. So, as I said, we're going to have representatives from the ICO, from the beneficiaries of the scheme, and we're also going to have two key speakers with us who are going to share their knowledge and their practice about this particular subject. At the end of the session, then, Rapporteur Stephanie Bonnici will be giving us a very quick roundup of what we discussed during the session. You are very free to send us your comments, send us your questions about this particular topic and about what is being said during this session throughout today's presentations. So you can do so via Facebook, or else you can do so on Zoom, where we have all our ICO beneficiaries there following this particular session. I would also like to remind you that this is being recorded by Arts Council. So I would now like to give the floor to Dr. Simone Inguanez, who is the Diversity and Communities Associate at Arts Council Malta, for her introduction. Simone?
Hello. So, in simple words, tonight we shall be looking into sustainability, into how we make our causes, our dreams, our hard work sustainable, both in the short term and in the long term. Help is here, and there is plenty of help, actually. The question is how to tap into that help. Of course, this is not like going to the bank. It's not like any project can be supported, but we need to match our projects with the sources we go to. Of course, we have to match our visions, our values. We have to match also our objectives. What we actually do is we invest. Most of the time, there is this idea of some kind of help that is kind of like charity, which is not what we do. Here we don't give charity. What we do is we believe in your journey, and we are very proud to be supporting your journeys. Support can be financial, and most of the time when we mention support, we think of financial support, but support is also support can also be in kind. It can be also support in terms of knowledge sharing. It can be support in terms of facilitating networking. And what Arts Council does is actually that. It is about facilitating. It's about empowering. So we actually provide also seed funding, bridge funding. We are enablers. We do not go fishing for you, so to speak, but we accompany you, and we accompany you in your journey, and in that way, we hope that you will feel much more comfortable when it comes to taking certain risks. After all, risk is very necessary. Calculated risk is very necessary when it comes to creativity, and we know that without such support, it can become very difficult to take certain risks. So that is, in very few words, what support is all about and what we shall be looking into this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Simone, for this introduction about Arts Council, its role, obviously, in supporting the cultural and creative industries. Of course, you have a number of different funding programs. I mean, this is one of the many funding programs which you manage. The role here is that of enabling, as you said, of facilitating, as you said. So it is very crucial in supporting the sector, particularly now, I would say.
Exactly. The idea is, of course, in our sector, what we do is we strive to make ourselves redundant, so to speak. We strive to help beneficiaries to become more independent in order to carry out their projects without relying on particular sources. And of course, in times like these, trying times like these, of course, all these things become even more important than ever.
Thank you, Simone. We'll have the time, obviously, to go into more detail about the subject later on. Even our speakers will be mentioning this very particular point. In the meantime, if you have any comments about the subject, feel free, as I said, to send us your questions, and then we'll be able to address them later on during the session. Thanks, Sim. So each session will be featuring a number of different organizations which are benefiting from the investment in cultural organizations. Today we are meeting representatives from the Foundation for the Promotion of Entrepreneurial Initiatives, Beland, and also Għaqda Mużikali Santa Marija Għaxa. Here is a short video which is going to introduce the organizations.
L-Għaqda Mużikali Santa Marija, bis-saħħa tal-fondi ICO offerti mill-Arts Council Malta, qed tipprova tagħmel pass aktar il-qudiem minn dak li hija l-attività tradizzjonali tal-gażini tagħna. Apparti kunċerti, wirjiet u l-affarijiet tradizzjonali li mmorru mal-Festa Maltija, l-Għaxaq Music Festival ta' Għaqda huwa wkoll investiment fil-komunità tagħna.
The FPEI, the foundation set up by the University of Malta and the Malta Business Bureau, focuses on promoting entrepreneurship. And by entrepreneurship, we mean the mindset of being entrepreneurial, not just starting a business. Therefore, we focus on training, education, and skills.
Il-Beland Music Festival avveniment annwali li jittella mill-volontiera ta' Soċjetà Mużikali Beland. L-attività issa waslet fid-9 edizzjoni tagħha. Il-festival jittella fuq 3 ijiem, normalment f'weekend fil-bidu ta' Mejju. Mill-aspett artistiku bħall-organizzazzjoni nieħdu ħsieb li ninvolvu firxa varjata ta' artisti lokali.
In this initiative, together with the Arts Council and through the Investment in Cultural Organizations Fund, we will be developing a program for training, mentorship, and also guidebooks on how artists and cultural initiatives can take a more entrepreneurial mindset and therefore become more sustainable in today's world.
L-għajnuna tal-ICO hija kruċjali biex dan il-festival jibqa' jsir, speċjalment għat-3 snin li ġejjin, minħabba li l-fondi jgħinuna biex ntaffu ftit l-ispejjeż tal-involuti fl-attività, imma wkoll il-fondi nużawhom ovvjament biex ninvestu fl-artisti lokali. Għalhekk il-Beland Music Festival ukoll qed ikun jinvesti fl-artisti il-ġodda wkoll lokali biex inkomplu ntejbu x-xena artistika lokali.
Dan it-tip ta' avveniment, apparti li huwa divertiment għal poplu ġenerali, fih ukoll l-iskop li nkomplu ninvestu fil-komunità tagħna. F'dak li huwa l-prinċipju l-aktar ċentrali ta' soċjetà mużikali li huwa l-talim tal-mużika b'xejn lill-allievi tagħna. Investiment fi skola tal-mużika ma jfissirx biss salarji lill-alliema, ifisser ukoll xiri ta' strumenti u t-talim kontinu ta' matul is-sena. Investiment f'riċerka u proġetti mużikali li jkomplu jtejbu u mill-ġdid jinvestu fil-komunitajiet tagħna bħala kultura, storja u wkoll tradizzjoni.
We are kicking off the session with a practical example. We're going to speak about how one particular organization goes about its fundraising activities, strategy, policies. Our first speaker is John Alexander Zamit from Għaqda Mużikali Santa Marija Asha, who is going to share with us some examples and his experience with the subject. John.
When we received the invitation for this webinar, it implied that I would be going further into further soul searching to what regards the financing of our society and keeping solid our activities, which, as you can imagine, were heavily lambasted by COVID-19. The incredible thing is that this pandemic literally besieged every type of activity we do, because most of the time we're dealing with the community, with people, mass events, being together, coming together, and obviously tapping into resources in our community and in the neighboring business community around our village. It was incredible in the last few weeks seeing the changes that could happen to any organization, especially to band clubs, which at the end of the day are totally voluntary entities who literally depend on the activities we do, on being self-sufficient, and on working very hard for our own resources. Our society, and it has been like that historically, it implied working hard for everything you do. Even if you go through our archives where meetings were minuted from the very moment the society started functioning, you will see that money was always a main concern. So it was always about pennies and cents and trying to make it work and being able to be ambitious with very little. Today, obviously, we grew. We can do bigger things. Our mentality changed. I think it was an important evolution for band clubs, for all band clubs in Malta, the realization that we need to go a step further than organizing small activities simply or specific to our own communities. The Asha Music Festival is such an example. It started with very humble origins 20 years ago by being a small venture, organizing a small festival for the community with the idea of boosting up the annual festa and trying to increase fundraising. It was a successful experiment. It grew further. And today, I think it's a very sophisticated organization with the value of having our own volunteers working for us, using their skills, making best of their talents, and most of the time it's working with the people we have. So it's young persons, it's older persons, different generations coming together. It's giving strength to diversities. It's really making use of everything you have, with the final end of trying to make money to secure the foundations, the economic foundations of an organization, by literally being able to create a subsidy for whatever activity we do. And that implies concerts for during the year, exhibitions, the participation in the cultural fabric of our community, where many times we are offering literally an entry into whatever is cultural and historical and the preservation of traditions. Thanks to the Asha Music Festival, we are able to support our music school, being able to update our premises, being able to invest in instruments, in creating more tuition for our students, the investment in master classes, for example. Without that type of ambition, without the type of change that we did, from going or simply investing into very small-scale activities, being able to go into something bigger And to do it well and to do it professionally was for us the bigger change. What really worked for us was actually the presentation of a good professional product that is reliable, that delivers. I think that convinced sponsors to invest on us, to be present for us, because not only they were happy to help the community, because they could see the sense of what we're doing, and I think they liked the final aims we were presenting, but it also meant that they had good coverage. It meant that they could gain in their own image making, because they could be part of something that is actually interesting. A major scale concert in a very different ambiance, in a very different setting, not the usual performance areas. And that formula worked well to the point that nowadays we can literally look forward to bring to Malta an important performance such as Smokey, which came last year for our anniversary. This year we were meant to have UB40, which was a major step forward for us, but unfortunately plans needed to be changed. And that type of attitude, that type of ambition, if you like, meant the salvation of a band club, meant that we can have a future. And being aware of the problems and being able to problem solve through sheer hard work, through sheer being there all through the year, a massive a calendar of activities that is never ending for us. And everything we do needs to be endorsed financially, and it needs to be feasible. Otherwise, it cannot be created, it cannot be put up literally as something that is seen and presented to the public. I can't speak of a real model. I can speak of experience. I can speak of the sheer hard work we do. I think that was our secret.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I think you mentioned a number of points which are relevant, which are kind of the very basics of how to go about raising funds. And as you said, raising funds throughout the years, right? Because I think the main challenge for you is to keep reinventing yourselves, is to keep being present, to keep being there. So I think I would say that's a challenge for you to just keep going and stay relevant as a traditional organization in a changing community, society. How would you go about it?
It absolutely is, because of course it's a very taxing calendar. In our village, the calendar is very fast-paced in the sense we go through the motions of Christmas, then you have Carnival, then it's Holy Week, then the feast start. Nowadays, local council would be organizing also mass events such as cheese and wine festivals, Maltese nights. And obviously the club needs to be present, needs to be working there to make the money, and in the same time, working to preserve traditions. Mm-hmm. It's literally not skipping an opportunity, and each time we try to present that something new. We're very conscious that the public gets tired very easily. Yeah. That novelty wears off very quickly. Especially now, I would say, like lately it's... Exactly, especially in a situation where our public is exposed to so many things, to many opportunities, to many options. So a small organization like a band club needs to be clever, needs to be really up to scratch and to be quite in touch with what's new. And I would say be able to take the risk and push a little the agenda forward. Band clubs or organizations that don't manage to make that jumping quality might have actually difficulty remaining sort of consistent and remaining alive, because I think it's an easy debt for everyone nowadays. The risk is there, not just if you fail financially, if you go bust because a series of events might take you the wrong way, but it's also not being able to remain relevant. Yes. I think that should be a major concern. You also mentioned what's happened now. So during these past months, I think it was very difficult to keep up your activities, therefore to raise funds. So how did you go about that, addressing that? Maybe were there any initiatives which you embarked on? First of all, I think it was dealing with the shock of it all, because it was like the apocalypse. The band club closed. Our bar, which is a major source of income for our band club, closed. The Lotto office, another major source of income for us, also closed. You couldn't do events. The village feast we knew it was not going to happen this year. So everything stalled for us.
The
And it
community
all
was challenged there completely.
And it was uncharted territory for us. We knew nothing of that. Actually, Second World War came close to it, because we know for sure that so many things stopped, because it's recorded in our archive, so we know that so many things simply stopped to be. And every now and then, people would be defying the rules and do something crazy, like, I don't know, letting off petards when they shouldn't. For us, it meant stopping. We couldn't really do much. The only proactive thing that was easy to enact was actually keeping the lessons for our students by shifting online, like all the committee meetings. But otherwise, activity-wise, we kept it safe. We wanted to observe and understand what was going on, because I think we were very conscious that a bad move could be disastrous. Already investment had been deposited towards the Għaqda Music Festival, because of course, when you're organizing something like that, you start early in the year. We had already launched our festival, but we decided to wait, and in due time, it was, of course, cancelled. Now we're taking the jump. In fact, we're launching this year's edition on a minor version. We'll be focusing on Maltese talent. It is our way of being optimistic. It's our way of hitting back and trying to fight back with this kind of positive attitude. I don't think we could do better than that.
Okay. Thanks, John. For now, we'll have the time to get back to that later. So our next speaker for today is Sophie Detremmerie. Sophie has spent her entire career on the cutting edge of business and culture. Flanders Festival is the biggest classical music festival in Belgium, where she worked her way up from intern via production, ticketing, and sponsorship manager to managing director over the years. After almost 18 years, Sophie made the switch to the World Choir Games 2021 Flanders as COO. Sophie? Hi, we're very happy to have you here with us. So Sophie will be sharing, obviously, her perspective from an international, having an international background. Sophie.
Thank you very much, Elaine. Good evening, everybody. Elaine introduced indeed the fact that I've been working on sponsorship for about 15 years now, I think. So I made a presentation, and I will take you through the evolutions that have been taking place, but also about how we're dealing with it now in this specific situation, which is for all of us difficult. So my presentation has two parts. It has a pre-corona part and a post-corona part. We'll start with the pre-corona part. Can I get the next slide, please? Yes, thank you. It has been mentioned already, but sponsorship can have different goals, actually. It's not only for the cash amount of money that you try to find a sponsor. You can also look at strengthening the image of your cultural organization by working together with big brands. You can also strengthen your communication campaign by working together. Also, your sponsor has communication channels that you can use. You can look to add new public to your organization, which could be the personnel of the sponsoring company, also the customers of the sponsoring company. And which has been said before, you can get know-how from your sponsoring company. That is a very important part, definitely now, because the private sector has, of course, more money than the cultural sector. That has been the case forever, and it probably will be in the future also. But it also means that they have the resources and the people to look for new and innovative ways to work your way around the COVID-19. On the next slide, you can see the evolution of a return plan. I think one thing is very important with sponsorship. It's not just you getting something from the sponsor, it's also you giving back to the sponsor. And what you're giving back depends a lot on what they need from their perspective. And during, decades, I think, of sponsorship, there has been an evolution in what private companies or private people in the beginning would like to get back from their partnership. Of course, it's all started with patronage or mécénat, where you just get money and you say thank you very much and hope you're working with it. That is all very long gone now. Then first you needed to put logo mentionings of the company in your communication. But later on, you needed a full communication plan for your sponsor. You need to give them advertisements, if possible, take them along in your radio spots, in your TV campaigns. And they also wanted hospitality. That started like 30 years ago, where sponsors want to have tickets, want to invite people in a VIP setting or not. But then also that was not enough, and you had to create more return. Something else came up. It's called brand activation. It's where you activate the brand of your sponsor for your public, for your own cultural public, in a way that it serves also your public. It should never be just flat commercial, anything in as a return. It should always be elegant in a cultural way. But then also there was still a growing path, and integrated storytelling was the next new hot thing in sponsorship. That's where you create together a story, where your values get together from a sponsor and your cultural organization. And where the values get together, you build a story together, and you communicate them both in your own campaigns and channels that you have. And then, of course, there is post-corona. What sponsors want now, or is still is again changed a little bit, but that I will handle in the second part of the presentation. On the next slide, but that I can maybe handle short. The next slide, yes, says something about hospitality, but that's what I said already. The formula of business seats, which is used a lot in sports context, is now very basic also in cultural organizations, where you pamper your sponsors and their guests through free parking and hosts and the best seats and a drink in the break and a walking dinner and a gift bag in the end, etc. Visibility, communication. It's very important that you see that the channels of the sponsor can also become your channels, and vice versa. So we always had a huge fight in the Clara Festival, in the Flanders Festival, between the business side and the artistic side of our company. No, we don't want advertise of our sponsors in our brochures and on our flyers. But you know, it's a two-way direction. We also can get in the communication channels of the sponsor. And then it's important that you have one message that you both communicate at the same time. And then the third part is the activation, the brand activation, as I said before. I will go into detail a little bit more on brand activation and what that could be, and I will give you also a couple of examples. On the next slide, yes, you can find what a sponsor, because maybe first of all I should say that it's very important when you're searching for sponsorship is that you use a lot of empathy, that you try to understand what your sponsor needs, what their communication campaign needs, what they're missing, which target group that they are searching for, and how you can match them to the ones you already have in your organization. So actually, you are a bit at the service of the sponsor, because they're always also at your service with offering you money and know-how, etc. So if we think from the side of the sponsor, what does a sponsor want to get out of a brand activation? I think there are three main points. And the first of all is they want to create engagement from their different stakeholders. And they want to use your cultural product, the performance or the exhibition, to do that. They want to motivate existing employees. It's very important for some companies, like, for instance, the big five, the consulting firms. They need to they search for new employees every year in a lot of like hundreds they need every year again. And so they need to motivate existing employees to stay for the first, and they want to recruit new ones. They can do that through working together with you on a cultural basis. They can also want to establish good relationships with business-to-business contacts that they have with governments. You can be the glue between the company and the governments, because culture and government, they work together quite often, or they have strong connections, and then you can put them at the service of your sponsor. They also want to create loyal customers. So they want to give things back to their customers. And the things that they can give back can come from your organization. The second part is that, of course, they want to create more sales. That's very direct, I would say. They want to have more customers. And things you can do for your sponsor is, or for instance, sampling the product, but only if it is like, if it gives the reason to sample that to your public too. You don't need to, bow very low for your sponsor, but you need to give them the idea that you really want to comprehend what they are searching for, and that you're trying to find a link between your organization and theirs. Sampling is one example, but also a new market penetration can be a goal of a sponsor. Let's say, for instance, culture is known for attracting a lot of female visitors. Some companies, like for instance, I could say car company, they have regularly, most of all, male customers. They want to reach female customers because women can decide also on cars, and mostly they do decide. I do think that that's on the side. So it's can be important for a car company to reach the female customers in the culture organization. And also direct sales leads. They need a database. They need information on your clients so that they can try to find more clients for them. That can be through test drives of cars, but that can be through pop stores. You will see an example just a bit further on. Third thing that a sponsor wants to get out is they want to have their brand central. They want to create brand awareness. They want to show that we have a value sharing between our culture organization and the sponsor. They want to be top of mind also in our public, and they want to create the brand experience. And all of these things you can see in the next slides, where I've put some pictures together from cases that we've done in the past. Here you can see a couple of customers from Neuhaus, the chocolate company, and they have offered a free workshop on creating pralines and decorating them, and then everybody could take them home. This is one of the lifetime experiences that you can offer to your customers to create good customers for Neuhaus. This is one example. On the next slide, you can see a sampling of Yakult. I don't know if you know the little drink that is very good for your intestines and your health. We sampled that after a concert in the biggest hall in Brussels at the Bazaar, after a classical music concert. Of course, also there we had to do a little bit of lobbying, because the concert hall that we were renting was not really keen on the fact that we would do sampling. It's a lot with sponsoring. It's a lot about changing perception of sponsorship, because I am really convinced that a sponsor is not an enemy. It's someone you can work together with and to reach common goals all together. And if you work together, you can get a lot further than when you would do that by yourself. So we also had to convince here the concert hall where we were organizing the concert, but we did, and they agreed to do that also the year afterwards. So that was one step further. On the next slide, you can find an example of a little pop-up store that we created with a brand of clothes and jewelry. We organized a cafe after each concert at one of the venues of the concert hall, and there we had a little pop-up store. People could watch, could feel the products, could see the prices, and then they could go to a web shop and order them if they would have liked. Almost no one ordered something, but that is not important. The important thing is that the brand got into the mind of your customers, and that the sponsor wants that. Next slide, which you probably already know, VIP shuttling, very easy way to create experience for a car, of course. You put them in the newest cars that you get from your sponsor, and when you have a nice driver and the right music, I think this might be a nice experience. Also, brand association is something that is sometimes wanted by sponsors. Now again, Neuhaus here, you can see the musicians. They were on stage at the end of the concert. They get their flowers, but they also get a bag with chocolate from Belgium. Most of them are international artists, so for them, they love it because flowers can't take along on the plane, but chocolate they can, if it's still left for the next day. Maybe they already ate it. Also there, we did receive a kind of negative reply, I would say, from a government in this case, where they thought that it was not possible to put a kind of a private brand on the stage in the concert hall. And I mostly agree on that border, I would say, but here it's very small, I would say, and so we did it, and I'm very happy we did so. And then the last example of brand activation was we've put a photo booth for free. This was together with Proximus. It's a telecom operator in Belgium, and we branded the pictures that come out of it, and it was in the look and the feel of the festival, but also the brand of Proximus was on it. So people take the pictures, they have a nice memory of a good evening, and most of them put it on the fridge, and it stays there for the rest of the year because no one ever cleans what is stuck on the fridge. So the sponsor is happy because it's inside the houses of our target public. And all of these things don't hurt our public. All of these things are even extra services like the pictures. Also, our public likes it to have a picture as a memory from the concert that they loved. So these are kind of examples where where you can like find creative ways to put brands into the heads of your customers without disturbing them. Of course, these are all nice examples when everything goes well, but there are quite some challenges also in sponsorship. And I think the first big challenge is the fact that you are sometimes on a thin line between what the sponsor wants and what you want to allow to your sponsor. And you are at the service of your sponsor, and also vice versa, that is the case. But of course, if you have a company where your contact person is quite strong in opinions and really is maybe a little bit dominant, it can happen. You have all kinds of people where you have to deal with. It's very important that you know for yourself to which border you want to go with your organization. And it's something that has to be spoken through in your organization internally, also within the team. So sometimes they want to go too far, and then you have to push them back, but gently, and maybe give them another solution instead. Sometimes companies go that far that in the end they just don't want to do sponsoring anymore, and they go to create their own events because they can brand it all the way, and that is a lot more of branding than when they come to your cultural events and they get a few logos and a banner and maybe TV spots. So it is also a danger, I would say. But I always believe that the solution lies in the fact that we, the creative sector, we are very creative in creating stories, in imagining and having visions of matters that the sponsor needs. So again, I think it's very important that you go with a lot of empathy to your sponsor and you try to understand what is living there and what they need and how you can help them out. And there's always with something that you can help them out, I think. So trying to find a win-win, making compromises, unfortunately, is part of the game. Work customized, never go with a standard file to a sponsor that's not working. They all want something else. And then the second big challenge is, the next slide, please, yes. The second big challenge is a rather new one from the last 2, 3, 4 years, where sponsors really want to get data from your public. And that is quite difficult because on the other hand, you have the GDPR regulation. But a lot of sponsors work more and more data-driven in their marketing policy. And that means that they want to do things online because then they can easily get to email addresses and reach to the audience afterwards again. So that is a very quite a danger. So it's something we need to think of as a cultural organization on how we can collect more data. Even for ourselves, we have to collect a lot more data than we do now. But then also this can help the sponsor, and so it helps you because then you can get the sponsorship. So setting up a good database system in your organization is so important.
Sorry, I'll have to ask you to wrap up,
yes.
please.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
I'll go quickly through the reg. The sponsorship handbook is the perfect tip. And then we're on the second part, which is the post-corona. I'll just go quickly through some things, but maybe this slide is quite usual. Of course, everything changes. Sponsorship budgets will be frozen till the end of the year, and it will be difficult, and you have to deliver more to get the same money, and etc., etc. But I think those two, the next slides are the most important ones. That is, what does a sponsor expect actually? The sponsor expects that you show involvement more than ever. They expect that you focus on society, because that is now the main theme. It's not so much culture, but it's society. And if you can glue them together, you're on the good way, I think. They need short-term return, and you have to prove your return on investment. So you need to be measurable. That is very important. They need numbers, because otherwise, even within the companies, they need to defend sponsorship up in the hierarchy. So it's necessary that you get numbers. What does that mean for the cultural organizations? I think you have to know what is going on with your sponsor. You have to look all kinds of things that you can offer to your sponsor. And maybe it's more than free tickets and communication. You have to do brainstorming internally, like what else could you give? Maybe you have know-how that you can share also with your sponsor. You have to enlarge the fan engagement around your events, so stretch your events. Also before and after your events, do communications, or maybe a pre-video, an after movie, and take your sponsors along with that. And also very important, but that we all know, develop digital experiences. That's what the Arts Council Malta is doing right now, and in a very professional way. So that is also something that we have to include in our work. Create new formats, yes, invest in database and in measurement. I have said that already. And also strengthen your position politically. That is very important. Lobby. I think that is so important that you have all the right connections lying there, because also for your sponsor there, they can be of great value.
Yeah. Sophie,
and then create added
Sophie,
value.
So at the moment, obviously, it is quite difficult, I would say, to convince the corporate world, to convince sponsors to support when many are in difficulty themselves. So what is, in your opinion, the general feeling about this, even in maybe for festivals which you are familiar with, which you are working with? What is happening internationally, particularly because of this situation at the moment vis-a-vis sponsors?
Well, I think the most important part is that where festivals succeeded in continuing their sponsorship, it is because they went digitally, because they had an alternative. Mm-hmm. If you just close down and wait until the measurements get better, it's better if you start to think about a creative way to have a new product, even if it is small, even if it is just 1 hour or 2 hours, it doesn't matter. It's very important that there is something. And then the sponsor that you have, you try to take them along. Finding new sponsors, that is, of course, something totally different, and that is difficult. And I don't know if it is really possible. I have to say that I have been trying to find new sponsors in the last couple of months and did not succeed until now. But I could succeed to keep my sponsors that are already there, to keep them along. And you have to do something. Also, they want to do something, and they don't want to sit and wait in the end. They also want to be the most innovative company and the one who is the most creative and who was able to do something. So you have together the same goal, actually. So get together, talk, and find something creative.
Yeah, so as we were saying first before with John, it's very important that we kind of are still there, that we're still visible, that we keep our activity going in one way or another. Kind of this is what you're suggesting.
Yes, and I have a very nice example in Great Britain. There is a book festival, literature festival, where normally everything goes live, but now they just changed it all and went digital with it, multiple days. And the sponsor went along with it, and they had a totally new result, actually. It seemed that the festival that usually attracts more local visitors now attracted people from all over the world, because people had time. Most of the people are more at home than usually. So everybody is searching on the internet to find good inputs, and they reached a very broad public. So now they decided that once they can go live again, they will do anyway also the digital version, because they reached a broader public.
Yeah, of course, it's not so easy and for every kind of activity to go online, because I know there's been this big debate about going online versus retaining to your true nature. And I think that is also a major challenge in this case, kind of keeping true to yourself and to your activity and reinventing yourself at the same time to keep going. So I would think that that is one of the most debated subjects which we had in these past months.
Yes, of course, it's true, and it's not possible for everyone to find a solution. For instance, classical music is a good example for that. And it's never the same. Classical music on the screen is not the same as classical music live, that's for sure. But maybe the music part can be shorter, and you can have talks with the directors, with the musicians, which are maybe otherwise not very reachable. Now they are, and you can more show the person behind the music. For instance, that's an example.
Yeah. Actually, I would also like to point out another thing which was mentioned in the presentation, and this is what is expected by sponsors, which is slightly different or similar to what is expected by funders, as in there's obviously the other side, so when you are pitching a project, when you are addressing a sponsor, a funder, whatever, there is another side, so you have to keep that in mind. But there is a difference between the two. Simone?
Of course, yes, there is a very obvious difference in that sponsors, their ultimate goal is that of reaching their customers. When it comes to funding, it's quite different in that most of the time, I think the best way to explain it is I feel like I am some kind of midwife who is helping to give birth to a particular project. And that is why then we are so proud of these projects, and why we are so thrilled when beneficiaries get back to us and tell us about how their project is doing well and helping them to grow. This is not the same thing when it comes to sponsorship. Sponsors wouldn't really be interested in that kind of relationship.
So it's actually a matter of understanding what you're addressing and why you're addressing that particular channel and addressing your requests.
And that is also why it is very important for the beneficiary to familiarize themselves with the strategy behind that funding. Because
so as Sophie was saying, knowing the company you're addressing, knowing what they do, knowing what they're after.
Exactly.
Keeping that narrative kind of going when you're addressing that.
That's it.
Okay. Perfect. Well, actually, another point which is very pertinent at the moment, based on a recent study, 86% of respondents of this local study, they said that at this point in time, they are really waiting for specific aid measures in order to be able to sustain themselves, to keep going as organizations or as individuals in the art due to what is happening and the crisis. So obviously, Arts Council now has that responsibility as well to make sure that kind of everyone keeps going and the activities keep going. So what's your take on that, the role of Arts Council now to fundraise in this context?
Of course, Arts Council has been doing its best in order to enable recovery. But really and truly, it's also very important that the beneficiaries themselves, of course, find ways of becoming as sustainable as possible without delay. I mean, of course, it doesn't always depend on the beneficiary themselves, but the sooner one recovers and the sooner one becomes more self-sufficient, of course, the sooner they can be more independent and do their own thing, basically, without needing to match particular principles.
At the same time, this is kind of a matter where there are clear difficulties which need to be addressed. So this is where a funder then would come in.
Definitely, definitely. As I was mentioning, funding helps you to take certain risks. I mean, taking risks is not easy, but to take calculated risks, usually you need to have some reassurance that if your calculated risk doesn't go as you would like it to go, then at least there is some kind of support.
Again, Sophie, I don't know, in the current situation, the role of governments and the role of sponsors in order to help the art sectors all around the world to recover. What's your take on that?
Well, I think they will never work together for you. So it's up to the cultural organization to build lines to both target groups, I think. Of course, to governments for subsidies and, of course, to private sector for sponsorship. I think spreading your income resources is also a way of spreading your risk. So I'm always in favor of that.
Okay, thank you, Sophie, for that. So now we're going to move on to our next presentation. So I invite Marvel Vella from Beland to share his experience, the experience of his organization in relation to fundraising. Marvel?
Thank you. I'm a member of the admin committee of Beland Band Club. I'm going to be presenting a little bit of a case study of how we manage our funding strategy. Basically, our mission is to teach music and entertain through music. So we operate a music school where we provide free music education to about 20 students in our school. And we provide the equipment and the instruments. We organize. We also have the band, Beland Band, who is involved in about 30 performances every year. And we organize live concerts and a lot of cultural and activities related to religious events during the year, with the feast and Good Friday. In terms of funding sources, basically, we have a distribution of sources, basically starting from our members. They pay the membership fees and the occasional donations. Sponsorships, basically we sell advertising space on our publications and also in relation to the events that we organize. We rent out also some parts of our property. So we have another income stream coming from rent. We organize a lot of fundraising activities throughout the year. Basically, our club is organizing activities every month, practically. And another important income stream is grants, government grants. We managed to secure a number of grants through public funds every year, and these help us to basically implement projects that we would otherwise not be able to implement or basically not prioritize. In terms of management, it's important to know that there are very stringent legal obligations in terms of finance. Basically, we are a Class 3 voluntary organization, so we have to submit audit accounts every year. We are, in terms of organization, we have the treasurer, who is the head of all the funds that within the club. and that's supported by a finance team. Basically, the role of the finance team is to direct the organization in taking financial decisions and planning and forecasting. And then we have a number of subcommittees, and every subcommittee is tasked with organizing the fundraising activities in relation to a specific goal. For example, to raise funds to organize the fireworks during the feast, or organize activities during the feast, or for example, during Good Friday. The keys, I believe, to have effective fundraising are basic planning. You need to know how much money you will need and when you will need it. Diversification, it is important to spread out as many income sources as you can. Basically, you're minimizing risk. And brand management is also very important. Basically, it's important to take care that everything that you do even affects the brand. So even when you're raising funds, you're also affecting the artistic side of the organization. Some challenges when it comes to volunteers. We're basically constantly struggling to find the volunteers at the right, basically with the right skills at the right time when you need it, when you need them. Competition is also a very important factor. As an organization, we're not only competing with similar organizations, but also with entities that are better funded, have better resources. So it sometimes can get tough. Again, staying true to your mission is sometimes challenging, because, for example, I sometimes find myself asking, how is this related to our mission, basically? So, something about the future. We are a traditional organization, so basically all our funds are coming through traditional means. So what we're trying to do is to develop a digital income stream. Basically, our message is getting across to the people of younger generation, but we're not capitalizing on that. For example, because they don't come to our club to buy a CD or to pay a membership fee. So we're trying to develop a digital income stream to be able to reach and capitalize on the younger generation. Something more long-term, we're looking towards expanding our music school, basically to increase capacity, and possibly that could also turn into adding an additional income stream that would support the same school. And before COVID, we were working on an initiative basically to tap into the tourism sector. We're working with a company that organizes tours, and we bring tourists. We organize tours inside our club, and we take them around town, and basically we like to tell our story within the club.
And that's it. Okay, thanks, Marvin. So obviously in your case, and even in John's case, we spoke about, to a certain extent, about crowdfunding, no? In the very traditional sense. So this is where the crowds come in, and the community comes in, and you collect, you raise funds through the various initiatives. But how is that, how is this relevant to your work, to what you do?
Well, basically, you need the money to sustain the artistic side of the organizations, Basically, our mission is to teach music. So, but the problem is that is not self-sustainable. So you have to organize other activities to sustain it. Mm-hmm. That's basically the funding comes in traditional means, because we are traditionally always people give donations, come to the club, but that is, we're seeing that is becoming a problem as we go along.
Why is that, Marvel? Why is it becoming a problem?
Because we are getting our message to the younger generation, mm-hmm. but the money comes more from the people who are older. So we are seeing that we are not basically capitalizing on the majority of our fans.
Okay, so that is why you said now you want to introduce the digital aspect close to, and is it, I mean, I know that you haven't started that yet, but in a way COVID gave you the opportunity to test it maybe.
Yes, we did some experiments. Actually, we did a fundraising campaign on Facebook. It was on the occasion of the feast, so we didn't organize the feast, but instead we said let's do a live streaming event on Facebook, and we tried to organize basically donations through the phone. Basically, people phone us and we go pick up the money. But there are some challenges with that. We would like that to be automated. You just press a button and give a donation. But we found that there are lots of difficulties in, for example, we tried to set up a Revolut account, but that is not possible with a voluntary organization. They don't let you, so you cannot do it.
There are some hurdles.
So there are some hurdles that need to be overcome. Yeah.
Is that your experience as well, John, in the sense, like when it comes to community and what happened, kind of just having to reinvent yourself?
Absolutely. I think the old system still works to a certain degree when it comes to creating events and provoking the community to give, because we still, I think, are lucky, both Beland and ourselves, in having communities that still find meaning in the sense of belonging, the sense of having your feast, that sense of identity. Yeah. And ironically, the pandemic brought that out. We went back to that type of pride, to that type of going back to your roots. I think the argument here is clear and it's valid also for us. It's not enough, and certainly you can't rest on your laurels and wait or simply get stuck in the old system. We haven't yet ventured into creating new platforms, but we are actually trying to tap into having our youths feeling the sense of ownership, because we want to make sure that that's there. And creating things such as our festivals is, in a way, provoking young people to feel they're part of that, because it's a representation of something which is meaningful, which is something of the youth culture. So we're not stuck in the old rut of just having the band and the tradition and stopping there. It's embracing that, preserving that, because I wouldn't want to give the impression that we want to do away with that. That would be a huge mistake, because it's us. It's something to be very rigidly taken care of. In the same time, it's good to be inventive and brainstorm into what could be digital platforms, new territories which could be made ours or invented for ourselves. Not always the transition is easy, though.
And speaking of new territories, we move on to Matthew's presentation. Now, Matthew Caruana is from the Foundation for Entrepreneurial Initiatives. So, Matthew, crowdfunding on digital platforms.
Yes. I'll tackle the subject from from two aspects. But first of all, I would like to give a bit of an introduction, if I may, about what we mean by the actual term of crowdfunding, as in one word, the crowd and funding combined together in creating a new term. This new term was created with the invention or the use of internet and social media. So when there was the financial crisis, people resorted to new ways of raising funds. Fundraising, as we've seen, it's been there from, you mentioned the archives, it's been there, the whole countless number of organizations have been living and working through fundraising. But we're talking here about crowdfunding in terms of using digital platforms, using the internet and the social media mainly. Other technologies come to play, but it's mainly focused around those two, where an organization, an entity, an artist could raise funds for a project, an initiative, through the means of crowdfunding. Crowdfunding usually takes the shape, it's in simple terms, it's the practice of raising funds through the crowd. So you're raising funds from small contributions of a number of people, from a large, ideally large number of people. So it usually takes the form of a campaign, where it's a time-boxed campaign, let's say a month, where you specify your objective, your target, and people then give money for you to raise and create that thing, that initiative that you wanted to do. There are various types of crowdfunding, but in this environment, we talk mainly of the donation-based and reward-based. Donation-based is where people give money and expect nothing in return. It's because they believe in your cause, they believe in your story, and just want to help that happening. The other type, which is probably more relevant for the creative or the cultural sector, is the reward-based. So what we're talking here is people get a reward for giving you money. Similar to what Sophie was mentioning in terms of the sponsorship plan, a company expects something in return. Similarly to the general audience. And these rewards could be anything, can be from a simple thank you email with a photo of the event or the organization that you're doing, to tickets, to free products like free books or free samples of what you're trying to create, being mentioned in the program, getting a memory, a souvenir of the event or the initiative you're doing, to also other things that you can latch on other sponsors, like we've seen there in the example Sophie was giving. You could say that these donations, these contributions get you an exclusive, I don't know, something like a wine tasting session from a sponsor that is a manufacturer or a seller of wines. So combining things together to create a new way of rewarding people, or getting a preview, being involved in a workshop, meeting the artists. And these are all things, ideas for your rewards in terms of setting your campaign. Just a brief point, a campaign, 3 pillars are the pitch, that you are telling people what you're doing, why you're doing it, what are the benefits, and explain who you are and give confidence in people trusting you with their money. The second part is the reward that we mentioned. And the last one is obviously the promotion. People need to know about you, need to know what you're doing, need to know about the campaign. And that's where the use of social media comes to play. This is, I mean, we already heard some examples or advantages from the other 2 speakers of why need to move to digital forms, to attract new crowds maybe. But also, the advantage there is to also add a bit of accountability. The names are there, the donations are there, the amounts that raised are there, listed in an independent platform. The platform also gives you the mechanism to raise funds. We mentioned that there are logistical problems sometimes for organizations to use their own mechanisms. So using the platform also helps in that case. Crowdfunding online this way also has the advantage that it allows you to tap into new audiences. It's an online platform, so you can tap into international communities, people from the diaspora that might have attachment with what you're doing, what you're creating, what you're doing. The last advantage of this form of crowdfunding also is that if an organization is trying to, or an artist is trying to reinvent themselves or opening new avenues for a revenue stream, let's say an organization is creating a coffee table book to be able to generate revenue from selling these books. So using the photos of the different events, different activities to create a new product. Using crowdfunding, you can actually validate that idea. Go out there to the market, tell them that you're raising funds for the printing of these books, and people pre-buy them. You're doing pre-sales, getting the money in advance, using the money you generate to actually pay for the expense of the book. But at the end of the day, if there is no interest, if the reply is weak, if there is the funding isn't raised, you know that idea is actually not fitting with your audience. So you need to look elsewhere. So it also serves as validation to your idea before actually spending money and printing the books, and then they're not sold, for example.
Matthew, but is there a little bit of resistance to that? As in, if I have a project which is not yet developed and maybe I'm not ready to put it out there completely, you know? So I did hear some comments throughout my career, I'm not going to put it out there as yet, you know. So what would your recommendation be?
There is that mentality, yes. Fear could be either the fear of actually failing, that you exposed an idea that ultimately does not raise the interest that you expected, and also fear of exposing some ideas that might be new and other people copy it and so on. And my reply is, I'd rather know if it's going to fail before I spend the money or before I continue investing my time. So I'd rather know beforehand. And for the sort of defending also the argument of I don't want to tell people what I'm doing in advance and other people will copy me is, if not raising funds will stop you from actually doing that, then having an idea which doesn't come into fruition is also not such a good thing. And other people are probably working on it and they're not waiting for you to copy it. They're already doing it or they're already planning it. But by exposing it and getting those necessary funds actually gets you to start. So I'd rather have an idea that I am the originator and ultimately an idea is only 10%. Then the implementation is what makes it original, what makes it new, what makes it successful. So I'd rather get the funding and do it rather than keep defending it, protecting it, and I can't do anything with it.
And did you see a change in attitude in these last months during the COVID period? I know that the very first initiative, at least local initiative, which was online, came to ZAR, and there was this crowdfunding campaign. So did you see a change in attitude?
Yes, I think the change in attitude came from both sides, from the cultural organizations, the artists themselves, as well as the people donating or giving their contributions. I think there is now sort of more an attachment to local things, to cultural things, traditional things that people started missing when they couldn't go.
A certain sense of solidarity, maybe, as well as John was
again,
mentioning.
yes, to support. I mean, they know, the audience out there knows the difficulty these organizations and these artists are going through at the moment, so they want to help. So it's also an opportunity, like we said, tapping into sponsorships from corporates might be a challenging thing. But so there is another crowd out there, which is your audience. Engage your audience, give them something different, give them something that they can evaluate and they can appreciate in these troubling times, and use it to pre-sell tickets for future events, future opportunities. But in the meantime, you're getting the revenue now and starting planning that. So this openness to raise funds from the audience increased from the artists and the cultural sector, but also the people giving money are also more open and more willing to support, because they feel that if they don't do it now, certain things may be lost forever.
Cannot happen. Okay. Thanks for that. So I'd like to move on to our final speaker, who is Nathan Farrugia. Nathan has led non-profit and for-profit organizations for over 20 years across healthcare, education, technology, and hospitality. He has a first degree in health sciences and a master's in business. He has raised millions of euros for great causes through a wide range of channels, from grants to crowdfunding, social enterprises, and philanthropy. Nathan, in your good hands.
Thank you. A big hole in that introduction is the fact that I have nothing to do with fundraising for the arts, which is going to be interesting. But I think the goal here would be to try and assimilate some of the experiences from fundraising for social causes, which is really mainly where my experiences lie. And I think, you know, from hearing what people have been saying, the adage of, you know, necessity is the mother of invention really comes through here. But I think what's interesting as well, and if I can just sort of just grab that, flip a slide, there you go, is this idea of charity. And you mentioned it earlier, and it has been said that we need to avoid perhaps this element of being cap in hand, you know, going and asking for money as if we are a charity that is asking for donations. And I think that what may happen, and what I've seen happen, is that we go too far the other extreme and become too transactional. It's too much of an exchange. What do I get to help you? Is the question you get from the corporate. And And I think that we have to be careful that we find the balance between what is good about having people genuinely giving you money for nothing, not to get a ticket for the concert, not to get a music lesson, but genuinely because they believe in what you're doing to give you that money. And the element of, yes, everybody needs to earn a living, everybody needs to work together to be able to sustain an economy, and therefore we have to have these partnerships with corporates that generate customers and generate sales. So how do we match that? How do we find that balance? And I think for me, in my experiences, it's been very much singularly dependent on your purpose. You know, how clear are you about your purpose? And you said, you said earlier how important it is not to lose sight of why you exist. And sort of selling your soul to the devil sort of thing, to raise the money. And I think this is really important because you need to be able to say no. You have to have the guts to say no. To say no to the money because it does not fit what you truly believe is why you exist. And this is really what's important when it comes to organizations that are driven by purpose, driven by passion, typically driven still by the founder or the person that created the idea. Or the legacy of that person moving on, whether it's family or community. And so, for me, it's really about finding time to ground yourself with your team and say, what do we stand for? And how do we get that message across? Because then you will inspire people to give. And it could be a corporate that gives, not because they're going to get tickets or they're going to reach the customers, but because they see what you're doing and what you're trying to create. And they feel a bit like the midwife and saying, we as a company helped spur that initiative and create that movement. And if we really focus, I think, a little bit more on those aspects, then we can inspire. And I think that is going to make life easier because people are going to ask less questions about the money. Yes, and I'll talk about having the right reporting structures and return on investment. These are important, but those are there purely to build trust. And typically for the second time round, to make it easier for them to say yes. But getting it the first time is really an inspiration. And it's about storytelling. The BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. What are you trying to achieve? You're trying to teach music to every single child in your town. You're trying to inspire a younger generation to put music as a center of their education. Whatever it is that you stand for needs to be built into a story that you go. And I'm sure you do this. I'm sure this is what you do exactly. But I think that, perhaps for the audience, wanting to go out there and try and ask for more or bigger funds, that inspiration, that storytelling is extremely important. We run social impact awards every year, and we give out tens of thousands of euros to social impact organizations, and they have to pitch to the audience. They have to inspire the audience to get their vote. It's a bit like the X factor for social enterprises. And the point here is practicing that pitch, really understanding how you're going to transmit that passion you have to an audience. Works the same way, whether you're doing it to an audience in an auditorium or a CEO or through your crowdfunding marketing campaign. It's the same thing. And how do you make sure that it's clear, concise, straightforward, and meaningful? You have to have plan B. I've been approached many times, from the business side to fund initiatives. And I say, okay, what happens if it fails? And I get a blank stare. Yeah, and I think, the honesty and the vulnerability and saying, listen, we're doing this from passion, we're doing our best, we understand that there are risks, and we're putting those risks out there to be able to mitigate them, and actually would like your advice and support to be able to build a business plan around exit or failure, or if something doesn't work. Actually gives me more trust to say, these people aren't trying to hide anything from me, they're actually being honest about what might go wrong. And that actually makes me more endearing to them, because then I say, these people will actually take my advice, or they'll be interested in receiving help from our organization beyond just take the money and run sort of thing. So being honest and open about your strengths and weaknesses at the same time, I think is very important. And also something that you want to do, and this is a metaphor for continuous growth, that once you spark something, you want it to be self-sustaining. The best type of money to earn, whether you're a business or a charity, is earning money when you're asleep. Passive income, okay? So you want to be able to create opportunities where you are generating revenues from a subscription or from rent, like you mentioned. things that are generating revenue without you having to go and organize a whole concert all over again the next year. Because that takes a lot of energy and effort and volunteers, which are hard to come by. And so if you have the opportunity to create sustainability through passive income, through income that is self-sustaining, then you are going to have the energy to be able to go off and do the concerts because you really want to entertain and because you really want to celebrate music, not necessarily worried about whether you're going to get enough sponsorship or doing the concert for sponsorship. So that, again, helps you really stay focused on your own cause. And so, the first port of call should be, how can I generate revenue that I can do once, put effort once, and keep it coming, rather than have to organize an event, for example, that happens every single year, that I need to put a lot of nights and energy and risk to do so over and over and over to raise the same amount of money. So, typically when we get projects which have a part of the funding coming through these types of mechanisms, that gives us as funders an opportunity to have some reassurance that, if there's a hurricane on the day of their event, that doesn't matter because 50% of their funding isn't coming from there, it's coming from somewhere else. And so, again, this is about diversifying your income stream. I really like the idea of, the lotto in your center, You say, what has lotto got to do with music? It doesn't have to be. We at Inspire, we raise hundreds of thousands of euros from our charity shops. They have nothing to do with disability. Mm-hmm. But they're creating a recycle economy, the use and reuse. So it's helping the environment and it's bringing money in. And we use it to pay physiotherapists to provide the treatment. It doesn't have to be specific to your cause, as long as your mission deep down is central and you know why you're doing it. So we don't exist to organize and run charity shops. We use charity shops to help us run our organization to achieve our purpose. So in essence, these are sort of some of the principles that we live by when it comes to, both from an organizational perspective, giving money, but also from my experiences of going and knocking on doors and being successful and not successful, what works and what doesn't work. Because the opposite of this is all the times I've knocked on doors and got the door slammed in my face. You learn from what doesn't work as much as you learn from what does work. And I've had plenty of experiences where it didn't work. So.
But what's happening now when you face a really difficult situation where there are less people maybe who can afford to give money to give the funds? So what happens?
I think you need to change the narrative. As the other speaker said, you need to change the way that you are telling the story, because now it's not necessarily about bums on seats at a concert or VIP, taxis to the venue. It's more about social impact. It's more about getting people together. It's more about community. So if you change the narrative, then I think people will give. My experience so far over COVID has been that some businesses have actually done very well. Mm-hmm. We've had businesses that have done well because they're in technology. So choose which doors to knock on. If you're going to knock on a hotel door or a hotel, group today, it's unlikely they're going to have the budgets to be able to help you. But if you talk to a technology company who's done well, go speak to Zoom.
That's a good idea.
You have to be strategic in which doors you knock on.
Yeah, but that obviously applies for, as we were mentioning with Simone, it's a matter of seeing whether it's that funder, whether it's that sponsor, which is more likely to help you in this particular venture, I would say.
I think if you really understand the person behind the person, so, the title was Getting to Yes. Who says yes? That's really important to understand, because if I know that person has a passion for the arts, then I'm going to have a beeline straight to their office and find a way to get into their office and give them the spiel. Mm-hmm. So I really need to study who I'm talking to understand what buttons to press. Now, if the person's interested only in environmental stuff, then perhaps it's going to be a waste of energy. Don't just sort of open the yellow pages and go, start with A. No, exactly. You have to really understand who is interested in this stuff and who can connect you. The 6 degrees of separation. In Malta, it's 1 degree of separation. How can I find someone who knows someone who is interested in the arts or interested in what I can offer? Because maybe it's not art, maybe it's education through music.
Exactly. Actually, we need to wrap up, but I'd like to see what Sophie actually thinks of this. Sophie, obviously Nathan gave us some ideas how to go about fundraising. You did mention that as well. And we mentioned particularly having a plan B, reinventing ourselves, staying true to ourselves, which seems to be a little bit contradictory now. So what's your take on this? What's the way forward from now on in this particular situation?
Well, I think I have to, I agree with a lot of things that Nathan said actually. Yeah, I think we said actually the same story, but in different words. And that is, I think, quite interesting because we approach it in a different way, going to the same goal. And I think the most important part is the fact that we have to focus on a social narrative. I think that is a very important thing. And I think culture is maybe just a way to get to a social goal and that you can sell. I think a lot of companies have missed the last few months to be visible because there were no events at all. So all of that visibility, all those plans, they were all not there. And so there are opportunities. And for instance, with the World Choir Games, which is an international singing competition for amateur choirs, people coming from 70 countries, you can imagine that today would have been the closing event of our event. So you can imagine that typically mass event and international, that had no option at all for this year, but we did a virtual one. And when I called along to our sponsors, they were very eager to send in a TV spot that we could use for our virtual broadcast. So I think there are always ways, and it's really comes down to being inventive and try to understand what the other party wants, and then see if you can deliver that within your own rules and boundaries. So I am quite hopeful, actually, also for the future. And also, as Nathan says, some businesses have done really good, like everything that has to do with e-commerce has done very, very good. Everything that has to do with entertainment, online TV has done very good. So there are always ways, and I am believing in a good future.
Thank you, Sophie, for those concluding remarks. Obviously, we are very aware that this is a very vast topic, and if we had more time, we could have gone into more detail, but at least we could speak about it and share some tips, some models on how to go about fundraising in this particular case. So Stephanie now will give us a very quick summary of what we've been saying during this session. Stephanie?
Thank you, Elaine, and thank you to the speakers. Again, a really interesting conversation, which was hardly a bit difficult to sum up because there are so many relevant points which were mentioned today. Today's conversation, as you know, was titled Effective Fundraising for Your Organization. So we tapped a bit into different means of generating revenue. We mentioned membership fees, rent, grants through public funds, crowdfunding and sponsorships. We know that help is out there, but the main topic of the conversation was how do we tap into it? And that more or less shaped today's conversation. We focused on different goals of sponsorship, so for instance, cash to finance the creation of the artistic product, strengthening the image of an organization, strengthening a communication campaign can also be a means and a goal for sponsorship, increasing audiences and collaborators, facilitating networking and empowering, and getting know-how from sponsors. So the question was, what increases the chances of sponsorship being secured? And some of the points which were mentioned was the planning that is needed in this case, the diversification and the different sources of income available so as to minimize a certain element of risk and pressure placed on the organization to continuously raise funds, brand management and knowing that what you do really affects your brand, presenting a high-quality product, both obviously for the customer but also for the sponsor who is going to be associated with you, and being in touch with what's new and remaining relevant. So an element of novelty came about as well, enabling sponsors to get on board by offering high-quality activities for them to be associated with in order for them to gain worthwhile coverage. And then obviously the risk of not remaining relevant and how that impacts an organization's image and the weight when facing certain sponsors. Sophie walked us a bit through an evolution of the return plan for sponsors and reminded us that what you give is as important as what you get. So the sponsors' channels can very easily become your channels as well, and also vice versa. So this evolution started off with the element of patronage. It went on to logo visibility, involvement in communication plans and hospitality, brand activation, integrated storytelling, and as you see, a number of ways by which sponsors become more integrated into your brand so that you can work together. So in terms of brand activation, what does a sponsor look for was one of the questions. And we spoke about creating engagement from different stakeholders by giving back, enabling sponsors to give back to their customers and employees, creating more sales by tapping into your audiences as a culture organization, and creating brand awareness, favorability, and experience in the minds of the cultural organization's audience as well. Obviously, COVID was mentioned, and the changes to this return plan also came up. We spoke about the need to be measurable and the need to present numbers to sponsors so that they can defend the sponsorship. Internal brainstorming is required now more than ever in order to know how you can share your know-how with your sponsor. Stretching events before and after, creating more means by which this brand activation can happen, and developing digital experiences. We spoke about some important things to keep in mind when discussing sponsorship. So it's important to understand how your sponsor thinks and what they need. Important to go to the sponsor with empathy, ready to see how you can help them as well. Important to remember that you need to work together with the sponsor, and important to be strategic and knowing which doors to knock on. Some of the challenges which came up were the need to stay true to the brand and vision of your organization, knowing your purpose, communicating your passion by telling a story in order to inspire sponsors, understanding what the sponsor wants versus what you want to allow your sponsor, what you want to allow to your sponsor. So lobbying and compromise comes into that as well. And obviously we mentioned the cultural sector's strength in creativity and enabling the creation of stories to meet the sponsor's needs, as well as an element of sustainability, so matching projects to the sources that are sought for sponsorship. Further to that discussion on sponsors, we spoke a bit about crowdfunding as another possibility for the general public to become your sponsor and the one you reach out to. So we spoke of crowdfunding as another digital means to attract new crowds, increase accountability, and tap into new audiences. And we had a bit of some information about crowdfunding campaigns and the fact that these can be donation or reward-based, so from simple things like a thank you email to ways of generating opportunities for sponsors as well through this income generation, and the fear of failing and fear of exposing ideas, which is something that sometimes keeps people back from sharing their ideas, and which might be changing also in the face of COVID and the element of solidarity that we've seen throughout the past months. So that was more or less
Thank you, Stephanie. It's getting more and more difficult every time to summarize. So I would like to thank Arts Council Malta, Marija Kauke, and all her team, our guests today, our speakers from FPEI, Beland, and Għaqda Mużikali Santa Marija Asha. Thank you for joining us and for following this session. Our next session is going to focus on teaming up, on seeking the right partners and engaging in ideal collaborations. We really do hope you can join us next week at 6:30 on Arts Council Malta's Facebook page. Thank you and good night.